In
Take it away.
progress. We did it. Hooray. Hey, so before I get too far, down below in the toolbar, there's a thing that says React. There's things like if you hit click that little heart, there's thumbs up, there's little laughter, hearts, things like that. I enjoy being interactive, and uh, that's kind of how I roll. I ask questions, I give and take. The more questions you ask of me, the more yeah. So basically, the more you ask of me, the more I interact with you is probably going to be the more expansive this is going to be. I'm not a fan of slides, so that'll be what they'll be. We're going to talk, we're going to do things, and I do have a little bit of a demo that's going to be in there too. So without further delay, we'll go ahead and click here on the share button. Now you can see my fancy screen with my teeny tiny one and only corporate thing that I'm going to be sharing tonight, which is our little logo. Well, I will be keeping an eye on chat. So if you do have questions and you're not comfortable coming off mute, you can put things in the chat. Chat is here. It's where I just put in a big pile of gibberish and just hit enter. So yeah, there's that. There's the emoji reacts. If you have a question, you can always do that to raise your hand or ask in chat as we specified. So what we're going to talk about, and I really do hope to make this as conversational as possible, is going beyond monitoring and alerting and talking about observability overall, because that's a thing that I am really passionate about. Yeah, go figure. I work at an observability company. I'm really all about observability. So, first up, what is monitoring? Well, monitoring itself is a thing, and that's just where you're keeping an eye on something for a period of time. And then you want to talk about maybe what you're seeing there. You're keeping watch out your window. Occasionally, I have the joy of trying to watch a concrete truck turn around in my crowded little parking area. It amuses me. I don't know why. It just does. Alerting. So now we've covered monitoring and alerting. So alerting. Quick show of hands or reacts. If you can, let's do this. Make sure I could see people. Oh, no one's on camera, just me. But quick show of hands. Have you ever been on call? Have you ever been paged or gotten an alert if something has gone wrong? Two, three. Yep. Yeah. Definitely. It's not fun. It's usually always at the worst possible time, as you can imagine. It's not great. So living in the Baltimore area as I do, I worked for a company, and during the summer, way back when I was doing this in 2011, 2012, I would have a lot of data centers and they would be in small buildings. Power would go out. I would get a phone call from the company that, takes care of monitoring up and down equipment, telling me that power supplies aren't redundant. And that's just a terrible way to live at 3 a.m. When you're on call. Not great. So ultimately, when you take monitoring and alerting, you're looking for something very specific. The example that I gave, power goes out, power supply is not redundant. Okay. Why is that? Well, obviously, I can tell power went out of the building. Okay, that's great. Other times, the temperature is rising. How do I know that? Well, there's a metric for that. And with that, I know what to measure. I know what to set an alert for. Those are things that I know about and that I can figure out a way to say, hey, if something crosses a threshold, I want to do that. To better understand that, you haven't lived until you rebooted a server remotely. Oh, yeah. So for those of you that may be new to tech, also, I try to keep this very new, user friendly. Even what Luke is talking about is that certain manufacturers of hardware servers, you can reboot remotely or even control remotely with something called either like a lights out, integrated lights out on HP, and it was for Dell, it was DRAC. So you can like way back when, before I would have to drive out to some places, which was miserable. The first option was always those, and the network was down. You can't get in. So that's just a little bit about there. Um, so how do we get to know some of these things to measure, learn about, and ultimately figure out about? It's through observability. And if you don't know the term observability, uh, my company's definition is here. Other people are going to define it other ways. Simply put, you want to be able to see into what's going on and then understand like what's happening. So I did mention like something's overheating, like a server, right? So I had one where the uh, AC would break in a building and they were already in a tiny closet. I would have to drive out, pop ceiling tiles, shut things down where I could, and it just wasn't great. And as Sam mentioned, mostly it's an issue when things aren't monitored and something happens, then you find out you didn't monitor it. And yeah, that is not a very fun life. I think a lot of us have been there. It's it's kind of wrapped into the marketing lingo sometimes where you try and tell customers, well, if you use product X, you can get ahead of that before your customers call you. Isn't that grand? In the grand scheme of things, that would be good. Um, so you kind of want to get to that. And how do you learn what to observe or what to look for in these cases? In the case of Sam's issue, where maybe the internet's down, maybe you have a centralized place where you have like a monitoring system. There's a lot out there. I'm going to highlight some use cases today utilizing OTel, Grafana, and Prometheus. There's all sorts of stuff. I think there's like a company called Zabbix. There's some other ones out there that you can just set up some pretty simple alerting if something is up or down. And of course, internet outage would say down. For me, the easiest way to talk about observability is being able to see inside of your stuff. Simply put, that's kind of what we're seeing here. There's a wine bottle. Through the wine bottle, you can see grapes. There's a candle, a glass with some wine in it. And this is a Wiki Commons picture I found of an X-ray of things. There's even bread in this picture that I thought it was really cool. You can see all the nails on the table, and that's kind of the goal for observability, at least for me. Now, anybody here? Does anybody drive a car? Cool, cool. Yep. Don't worry, Paul. I got you soon. Um, cool. All right. So yeah, one of the most common ways that I try to help people talk about observability is just kind of highlighting like what it's like in a car, right? The goal with that is that I can see how fast I'm going. I know if I need to stop and get gas. And if you're lucky like me, the last time I had to stop and get gas was somewhere in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and there was a Bucky's, so I got to stock up on all the Bucky swag and got to pay homage to the giant beaver there. So, what we're really looking at with a dashboard like this, and how does it make it easier and safer to drive? Well, simply put, you know how fast you're going. You're going to know if there is some type of a generic warning, like check engine light comes on. Or in this case, we see that there's a hot and cold meter for your radiator. So you know if your car is about to overheat, you get to be aware of what's going on. And now you're in the know without something going drastically wrong or trying to guesstimate how fast you're going. Although in the Baltimore area and sometimes even the Philadelphia area, you find that mileage may vary and speed limits are merely suggestions, much like turn signals, if you will. So far, so good. Everybody feels all right. We're doing all right with the examples so far. Got a thumbs up. Cool, cool. All right. So we're all in the IT world, technology world. how are some ways or what are some ways we can visualize and learn about what's happening to our systems? How can we get some signals from our systems? Well, without observability, we have examples. And one of my favorite examples is the example button where you just click OK and you've exampled. Relatively new, back from the dead, blue screen of death. I promised I wouldn't talk about it, but I'll just say blue screen of death. That's an interesting signal that something isn't quite right. And if you're like me, you traveled on Friday, and I was lucky enough to be on Southwest. I made it. I got home, and that was great. But if you're one of the unlucky people, sorry, it happens. And then when we go from some of these things without observability, we're going to start talking about, as Paul mentioned earlier, he talked about uh, his question, or he said he's concerned about degraded performance with high log output and tracing. So one of our more advanced signals and the ways you can get there better observabilities. And yes, this is an ugly slide. It's purposely ugly just to highlight how ugly it can be without utilizing a tool to help you put things together. Uh, the tracing, that's going to be here where it says flame graph, where we see something that says main, print directory, something's going on there. And these are going to be individual services, or you may want to call them methods or something along those lines. I call it services. And what we're saying is that we have a main process where there's something to print a directory, sort files, and so on. That's what's going on there. So that's what is called a trace. We're visualizing that with a flame graph. I do have examples of that with this OTel demo. I will share the link to the OTel demo. You can spin it up on your own laptop, your home computer, whatever you have. It's free, it's open source. You can make what you want. All layers of abstraction on top of tail minus F. Well, yeah, oops. So we do have logs in the background. That's where we have the core info collector over there. Was that something I did? I think it was something I did recently. Yeah, I think that was more or less tailing logs on my own laptop. That's what I did there. Tail minus F, if you're unfamiliar with the Linux terminology, you're just asking your computer to read the last line of logs and just keep going, iterating, and each one goes zipping by, kind of like the Matrix. And then I just ran top on my laptop, which is a MacBook. So I just said, hey, top, and then that's the top things on my laptop that are using the most memory, CPU, and more. So hooray, now you've seen inside. And yeah, there's a little MacBook spy agent on there. Cool. So when we're talking about observability, and we're going to try to even go beyond like the basis of observability, but first up, simply put, we just want to talk a little bit about like, well, web application. The example that I'm going to show is a web app. It's this. It's the Hotel demo where I can click go shopping. I can buy things from this fictitious web store, and yeah, we could do that. So following the same kind of nomenclature here, we're going to talk about what we have in parts of the web app where the infrastructure. Uh, I'm pretty sure that everybody here knows a little bit about infrastructure, either from terms of like Luke and I mentioned, kind of like on premises stuff. You may be more familiar with AWS at this point, which is great because now I can further automate things and not have to get any more additional scars on my hand for when I'm rack mounting any servers, which is nice for me. So the infrastructure aspect, where is it? Is it kind of like that workshop that I ran yesterday where everyone's on the East Coast of the United States and we're trying to spin up stuff in Ireland and it takes a little bit extra to connect? That happens. That's something you can measure with things like latency or other tools like that. Test your own network for how that's working. And with that infrastructure, how is it running? Is it hot? Is it cold? Temperature wise, that's important too. If you're running an on-prem data center and your air conditioning goes out, they'll melt down quick. Are they being overutilized? And we're going to talk about how we measure some of this stuff too. And beyond that, front end. The front end's important. Is it easy for people to use? Can my 86-year-old father figure it out and make something happen? Or does he have to call me? Which does happen to make it happen. Or does he go, I don't understand the goggles, which he means for Google, and then Netflix, which is Netflix, but he's old, he's 86. And then the code, going back to that code piece, is it working? Is it accurate? Why? How long is it taking? Where are the errors from? And one of the cool things we're going to see is related to tracing. And I will highlight one of my favorite parts that requires no configuration beyond just the setup of the tracing aspect. And for me, the most eye-opening thing is understanding how my applications communicate. And that's probably the biggest piece of it all. So when we're getting into the nuts and bolts of how things go, metrics. That's how I know the things about that server or that Docker container, Kubernetes cluster. How much drive space do I have? How much CPU, memory, RAM, you name it. There's a metric. If you can measure it, we want to measure it. So metrics are going to be numerical values that you can track anything within your environment. And you really want to do that over time. With metrics, I was asked yesterday if my company retains them for a short period of time. The answer is no. We always retain metrics for 15 months. And does anybody work retail or retail adjacent? Cool. All right. Usually the use case I mentioned for things like retail is that you want to compare seasonal analysis of time over time, or maybe, Super Bowl traffic, something like that. But metrics, we're talking numbers, we're talking how do we measure things. One of the ways that is built into this demo that we have is Prometheus. And I have built in the URLs here. I could provide the URLs once I wrap up the slide portion of the program, or I could do it now if anybody wants. But I've included the URLs, like how you can learn more about each individual item. So with metric data, Prometheus is one way to go about obtaining information, and it's really common, especially if you're using Kubernetes. Kubernetes and Prometheus really go hand in hand when you're talking about those metrics from there. And simply put, it's a CNCF project. That's the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. That's the team that does all the different projects. And I know that y'all have seen the really crazy map of all the different things they have. So with that, it collects metrics from specified targets or whichever. We're going to be able to present those in a place so you can utilize a tool such as Grafana. And that way you can maybe start putting them in a dashboard, for example, or if you need to set an alert on something. Another way to get metric data is going to be something that I will highlight quite a bit today, and that's going to be OpenTelemetry, yet another CNCF project, which is based around pulling in signals. And those signals are going to be in the form of metrics, traces, and we're also gathering logs from OpenTelemetry. And that's really why I wanted to highlight that today, is because it really has a good grouping of multiple different things all at once that you can pull in without a whole heck of a lot of additional configuration. They do have auto instrumentation. And if you're not familiar with auto instrumentation or instrumentation in general, that's where have an application, we'll say maybe Python, I want to pull in some tracing client libraries and tell it to send these trace data basically to a backend somewhere. so I can get those pieces of information. So that's metrics. And what do you do with metrics? Well, I just wrote in here uh, that with the metrics, you can use Grafana to do graphs, dashboards, and more. You can set alerts with Grafana to alert you if something's going wrong. Question from Paul: performance hit with instrumentation. It's usually very negligible, very, very minimal. I don't have the data readily handy. With my products that we have, I know a search query that I could find that pretty easily, but it is very, very minimal. Cool. All right. So that's metrics. Does anybody have questions about metrics? And as Paul mentioned, Grafana is nice. It can run locally. Um, and it is in this case, as I'm doing in the background. All right. Does anyone know logs beyond being an old Gen Xer like me and the Ren and Stimpy show where logs, they're big, they're heavy, they're wood? That's a terrible joke, but I love it. Rumblamo. That's right. So the important thing about a log is text. It's like um, standard out, standard error, or just maybe informational text. It's a text file. It's one thing that starts usually with a timestamp, which is possibly the most important part. The timestamp is incredibly important. Uh, and there's a question. Uh, how are these monitoring tools installed on the servers? That depends. I hate to give the consultant answer, but the consultant answer is it depends. I could pull up how this was installed uh, via Docker, which is how I'm running it. I'm running this via Docker. But in other ways, there may be an agent you install, but ultimately with OpenTelemetry, there's a collector and exporter, something along those lines that will ship that data out. And it requires usually tracing client libraries and the means to a configuration file that says this is my exporter or this is where I'm sending to. So that's just the OpenTelemetry part. We can look at how that's installed and it's configured. There's other tools from various other vendors where you can install maybe an agent on a server itself, and then you can configure it to look for specific things. But there's a lot of different ways, and we can dive into that. All right. As mentioned, logs, timestamped events, standard out, standard error. Here's the thing. I start with logs and then talk about traces next. And the reason why I do that is because a log is one thing and one thing only. And we're going to see traces are different. It's going to be a collection of things. Usually with the logs, we'll link those to traces so we can take that single log and we'll link it to other events to be able to tell more of a complete journey, which is really darn cool. So with logs, you can get logs either from Logstash, but we can also pull them in from OpenTelemetry. If you're not familiar with Logstash, it's another open source tool where we're talking about pulling in logs and then putting it to another location. In this case, with Elasticsearch, that's the logs are the L and the ELK stack. The E is Elastic, then the L and then the K is Kibana to search everything. But with logs, I don't know about you, I use them for sometimes troubleshooting, sometimes just to get a basis or a good understanding of things, or I also want to run some type of pattern analysis around them. There are two types of logs, as Paul says, free form and structured logs. That's correct. Uh, then there's another type of logs which are Java related. They're multi-line logs, and you may have to do a little bit of extra to kind of put them together, but it's a little more advanced. I don't want to scare anybody. It's kind of crazy. Everybody cool on metrics and now logs. One more topic to go, and that's traces. this is where it gets a little different. And for me, I was always more of an ops guy. And when I had to start learning to talk about traces, it was scary. Not going to lie. Uh, the definition I got from work: deep visibility into your applications. You can find bottlenecks, troubleshoot, and optimize. That's a lot of words for not a whole lot, but ultimately, what we want to do and why traces are incredibly important for distributed applications, mind you, business value. You want to find the bottlenecks, the things that are slowing your customers down. As I believe it was scrolling. Sam mentioned earlier, when customers aren't having a good time, they let you know. With traces, you'll be able to see things like the latency, how long a request is doing. And for me, the textbook definition that I have here is okay, but ultimately for me, a trace is an end-to-end request. When I go to Amazon to buy magnets because I make little fidget spinners out of my magnets, I click add the cart. That action of adding to a cart kicks off a trace. So we're going to see in the examples, like there's going to be a top level for a trace that's going to be the parent. And then all the spans that make up the trace itself are individual pieces of work. That's where maybe some database lookups come into play. Maybe there's some caching involved somewhere, and there you get to see like that cache piece in there. So we'll see that inside my demo. But when you think of traces, unlike a log, which is one thing and one thing only, with a trace, you get to see all the individual units of work that may span 5, 10, or more other services. And that's why it's really cool and it's really helpful. One of my next speaking engagements is going to be in August, where I'm talking with Google about how to migrate your infra to the cloud. And one of the ways you could do that a lot easier with tracing. So, how do we get traces? Uh, you can get traces from OpenTelemetry, which is what we're going to look at. And again, we talked about it, but it's was two different projects, Open Tracing and Open Census. They've merged, and now we're going to look at that all together. Understand the dependencies and the latencies for your application. Okay, so are we ready to take a look at the OTel demo? Got thumbs up. All right. So this is kind of interesting, and maybe I will go ahead and maybe I should start up here. We'll just do a new window. Don't mind me, I'm working on a separate screen that you cannot see because now my screen share is paused. GitHub. I just want to make sure that I have the OpenTelemetry demo for you. Okay, go to desktop number 2. Desktop number 2, and I want to link this on in to there. Boop. All right. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to pull this and pop this in the chat in case you're interested. I do like to leave y'all with things that you can do on your own. And there was a question: how do you install this onto things? Well, so in this case, what I did was went ahead and went through the quick start of Docker, which if you click here, basically what you do is to run the demo in Docker, you're going to clone the repo. And if you don't know GitHub and you're relatively new to tech, please learn some of the basics of Git, even if it's just git clone, pull, push, how to delete a repository from your local machine and clone it again. Just some of the more easy things. This is a really easy demo to set up via Docker. If you have Docker installed, you just type in make start, and it's up. And when you're done, you want to get rid of it, you just do make stop. Pretty easy. I don't think of anything easier than that, but you can also set up your own backend, which is pretty darn cool, if you ask me. Um, so some of the other things that you could see here are different dependencies, README files, make files. So you could always like jump in and start to take a look at how things are configured. If you want to look at the things like the accounting service, there's how do you build the binary for that? How do you use Docker Compose for that? Um, you can also look at the Docker file. This will help you maybe understand a little bit better of how things are instrumented to work with things like OpenTelemetry and things like that. Um, so basically, going ahead and looks like this one's a .NET service. So you can see that here from Microsoft.NET. Who knew that I would grab the just at a whim the one Microsoft.NET thing? It's kind of funny. Anyway, so we're just doing varlog OpenTelemetry.NET. That way we have have logs to be able to view. So if you are curious, as we mentioned before, please do look at this demo. Fun fact, this is one of my coworkers right here. He lives in Austria. He just started working with me a couple of weeks ago. Pretty good guy. He maintains the demo. Okay, so choose your own adventure time. I've already showed this off. We can go shopping. We can buy binoculars, solar filters, a book. You know, add that to cart. We can pay with this fake information, place order, boom, did that. But the neat thing about this demo is that there's a lot of automated processes going on where everything is being pulled in. You don't have to worry about manually going through to make things happen. It does it for you automatically. And there's also feature flags. Quick show of hands, are you familiar with feature flags? A couple of yeses, more yeses. Cool. For those of y'all that are not familiar with feature flags, it's basically like you can toggle something on and off. I have toggled on a couple of the errors for this demo, just to be ready to show off some of the more interesting thing. LaunchDarkly is a pretty cool company that helps people integrate feature flags into their applications. Another really interesting company. And in part, LaunchDarkly is how I got to be where I am because of one of their former advocates. I believe she was using the Twitter handle that was Wired Ferret. Um, Pretty cool. She's awesome. I just blanking on her name now, but I digress. She spoke at Baltimore DevOps Days, did a whole talk about Waffle House, and I was like, I want to talk to people about technology. Okay, so enough about me. We're not here to talk about me. We're here to help you all learn some stuff. And one of the things that works with OpenTelemetry is going to be this tool here that we're looking at. This is called Jaeger. Jaeger is another way that we can look up the traces. So here we're talking about a service. Paul mentioned microservices. If you're not familiar with microservices, I like to say that a microservice should do one thing and one thing well, somewhat like a container should be a process when you think about it. Maybe like a single process that is like Redis or maybe some type of front end like Nginx or something like that. Something that is very dedicated to do one thing really, really well. And in this case, I was looking at the checkout service. I chose checkout service because there's a feature flag for errors. And that's something that we're pretty familiar with as people living in this world that we do. We've purchased things from online vendors. That makes it easy enough for me to say, hey, I see that there's errors here. That was 340. Let's just go for something new. I can refresh, and there's 740. A minute ago, I have 9 errors, And then I could see the various microservices from this level here, where I could see that there's 4 errors with the checkout, 4 from the front end, a couple of the proxy. Heidi Waterhouse. Yes, thank you for that. Heidi Waterhouse is awesome. She takes stickers with her everywhere, or she used to. I don't know if she still does or not. But anyway, um, so yeah, we can go in and click on that here. And if you recall before, I mentioned there's like a whole trace, and then there's these spans, the individual units of work. And I was kind of saying how each individual thing does something different, and that sometimes you may be talking to multiple services all at once. So in this case, with that checkout service, we're going through the front end. Then there's the checkout service over here. There's the cart service, and then a lot more. We can start to break this down and start to understand some of the things that are going on here overall. We go from microseconds all the way up to milliseconds. So overall, this is really fast. 12.74 milliseconds. It's really nice. If I'm looking to optimize something, the time is probably not going to be it. But one of the things we could do to make this maybe a little bit easier is to maybe say, let's look at this as a graph. And then we can start to see like the upstream and downstream dependency view, where I mentioned before, you don't have to do anything with this once it's running. There's a load generator. It's automatically going through and generating some traffic for you. Goes through the proxy. So now we see basically the journey of how this trace was made, coming through the front end, and now it's kind of go through that checkout service. So there are different views. I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with something like this, to go through a view like this, because it will help you understand things a lot better. A good view for me is to look at it from here, where this is that parent, and then all the individual spans. We get to see all that here. We can click flame graph view. I can view it as a table. It's actually pretty cool. And then some of the more interesting things that we can do here is, let's see, I'll just click here on this cart service, val key cart. And of course, we talked about logs very briefly, and there's several logs here. The reason why I highlighted as I did, and it's a little bit of a callback to what I was talking about before, which is a log. A thing happened at one period of time. Now, with this, we're kind of gluing it together and bundling it in with this trace to help understand that, yep, this is more of a complete story that we're trying to tell. So ultimately, we can expand here and start looking at the tags. Is everyone familiar with tags? I hope so. If you're not familiar with tags, key value pairs, you need them, you want them, you gotta have tags. Tags on as many things as you can is going to be helpful. It adds, in the observability world, what I would like to say is either cardinality or additional facets to something. Like a facet, if you look at a jewel, the more facets, the more sparkly and pretty and whatnot it is. It also adds more information here. What is being tagged? In this case, there's a lot of stuff being tagged. My database system is being tagged, so now I know that's Redis. My format here is being tagged as OTLP. That's the OTel protocol, basically. My peer, the SpanCons client. There's tags beyond these tags. There's tags everywhere. Basically, always be tagging. Other tags that we'll be able to pick up at product, the error is true, which is way I can search in here too by doing error equals true. It's a little bit different than my proprietary service, but that's still cool. Things like that are tags. Other tags will be things like the service name. This is going to be more of a function call, the get product, It might be like if you've done any type of web work, you're probably pretty familiar with that. And that is one of the interesting things that we can look at within. Um, this is a complicated topic, so I will pause. And if you do have questions, this is the most complicated thing I will talk about all night. So please do ask questions if you have them.
So um so I'm looking at this as a developer. So if I was going to add a tag to my service, is that an environment variable?
That's
Or
one way that you could do it.
okay. And then if I'm in the code and I set up a span, a trace span, how do I add a tag to that span?
Yeah, with that, you would do that through your code itself.
Yeah.
So let's see. You would probably go through within here. So you would have current span within here.
Yep.
I'll probably leave you the docs. It'll probably be a lot easier that way.
So
But
this
what we'll
is
see
good.
is
So this attribute here, it's a tag, right? Attributes and tags and labels, they're all
correct.
kind of interchangeable. Okay,
That is
excellent.
also correct.
All right.
Yep. And you do have the link within here that is linked to this, so you can recreate
Yep.
your.
Yep.
Any more questions? Like I said, I do know. Do not be afraid. Um, I am by no means an expert or a genius or rocket scientist. I am just a guy. I am the son of a plumber. So I have learned how to do all this by a lot of trial and error. So there are no dumb questions. There's no dumb anything. I will fight anyone that says otherwise. So um, I'll give it another couple seconds. What is the main use case for the Jaeger UI? In this case, it is exactly basically what we're looking at. If I wanted to see all the errors from, let's just choose front end, and I wanted to see all my error traces or where errors occur, I would say error equals true. And now I can start to see some of the interesting things. And thank you, by the way. Um, you reminded me of something that I wanted to show, and then I didn't, and I got a little sidetracked because that happens. So one thing, search, go back through my history. I can say the last 12 hours and more, right? So that's kind of one way that I could search. That's pretty cool. But beyond that, there's also where I can say, okay, give me the front end web. I want to see this from the client side. So I can see all my post requests. So HTTP post, posting something. I could see all my P95 latency, the 95th percentile, the request rate per second. And this is over the last 24 hours, but let's just say 5 minutes. So I could see here I had a spike in latency. So this is all why you would want to use something like a view like this within Jaeger. I haven't really dug overly deep within Grafana to see if I can do the same, but ultimately, these are the why. To go through, let's see, quote service, server metrics around the latency before, as we saw. And then this is pretty neat. I mentioned like knowing your dependencies and knowing what's communicating to what. This kind of blows me away that this is in here. And I'm just going to go to this DAG view, this diagram view of how this application works. And for me, this is cool. Uh, this is one of those areas where I did nothing to get this aside from just booting up the demo itself. It figures this out based on the system calls that are being made. So yeah, there's that load generator that's generating traffic to this front end proxy, which passes traffic onto the front end, and then more, right? So from there, that front end communicates to the checkout web service or checkout service, which communicates to all these other sub-services. And the reason why this is cool and the reason why observability customers like this sort of stuff, you may find some really weird things that are connected into your services. Like you may have never expected. The numbers are going to be requests per should be requests per second, I believe.
It's not latency or anything like that. So it's requests.
Okay.
It'd be nice if they.
Yeah, it doesn't give you a good view of what it exactly is. And I'm sorry that it's like zooming in and out really fast. It's a
Yeah.
local demo will do that, but this is the other view that you can have where you can start to say, all right, here's my front end. What is the front end communicating with? And what's the downstream dependency? Or what communicates to front end? Well, that's the front end proxy. What does front end communicate with? Product catalog, all this stuff. Let's see.
Yeah, this is real nice.
So then that just talks here. This talks there. Um, these are really great for discovering what is communicating where. So that is our high level look at traces overall. And this is all included in that demo. Like I said before, I did nothing to get this. It's just there. This is all included for you to click around, try stuff. FAFO, as they say, to fool around and find out.
I just want to, when you build a new application as a developer, putting those traces in and adding your spans, that is a bit of work. So even though we're saying these demos, you get it for free, they spend a lot of time developing these demos, so they look real nice. And
Yes.
I just want people to realize you don't deploy an app and get all of it for free. You have to put your instrumentation. You have to add your trace IDs and stuff like that. So just FYI.
Sometimes. For proprietary ones, you don't have to make your own trace IDs, but a little bit different. For open source, your mileage may vary. Cool. Another piece that we have that is part of everything is our Grafana dashboard. This is everything that's happening with that same demo environment, where we could see the spans rate. So we're still looking at some of that span data. We're looking at different metrics so we could see accepted traffic. And the reason why you want to do this is obviously you want to have something to look at. So that way you can say, understand like how much log volume you're sending in, which is here, the logs record rate. Wow, getting tongue tied. And a lot more. Logs records rate, we've already seen that. The export queue size, so doing fine. That's going through Prometheus, as we see here. So we'll see the max queue size there. Capacity for my exporter. That's exporting data out from the Docker containers to my backend. The collector data, that's what we're collecting all the stuff with. So my memory utilization's over here, the heap memory. Instance count, I only have one. It's just my simple Docker container here. Uptime by service instance. Been up a little while. I took it down earlier. I had one that was running overnight and thought I was going to talk about it and then decided to throw the feature flags in to show errors. So that happened. Data flows, OTel through the processor, the debugger, things like that. Overall, just a nice little out of the box dashboard they provide you with that you just open it up and just look at your demo collector. There's spam metrics, or I can look at things as a gauge, things like that. This doesn't define that, but top 7 servers mean rate over range. A lot of requests for that front end proxy, which doesn't surprise me. Um, so there's a lot of neat things within this demo product that you can take a look at and click around and really start to figure out how to break stuff, which for me is the fun part. I was trying to find one that there's something I could see that was really easy to see error rate, but I'm not seeing that. Yeah, latency, error rate, there it is. So you can see the error rate for specific ones as expected. Uh, the recommendation service is one of the feature flags that I turned on to see the error rate. This is really important, as we mentioned before, like if your customer is having a bad time, you can get an idea of that. You can also kind of look at this is the what's sending all the traffic to things. So this is my little load generator. I can stop it, start it. I could look at things like the failures and start to see where those reside and also get an idea of that, which is pretty cool, all within this nice little demo. It's all contained neat in one spot. Now, you can also create alerts and stuff with Grafana. You can do things like alerting and more. I haven't set any of that up yet, so just know you can do it. It'll take some configuration. Grafana is very configurable. As you can see, this is running all as local host. That way I can just tear this down when I'm done. I don't have to worry about things, which is part of my goal for doing the meetup as we did. Um, but yeah, how long do we have on this? I forgot to ask. I could probably go on for a while, but I think an hour is what we maxed for, right, Judy? Am I
Yeah,
wrong?
yeah. If people want to listen, if you want to go.
What I'll do now is I will just go ahead and go through and send those links from my slides. Is there any questions? Feel free to come off mute, by the way, and ask questions. I am mostly friendly.
Yeah, I too would like to hear people questions or even observations or thoughts. Anything?
Okay, I can go first.
Yes, sir.
Okay, my
Hi
name
there.
is
How do we
Usman.
pronounce your name, by the way?
Usman.
Usman?
Yes, and I'm a system engineer, and I used to work with some observability tools.
Cool.
And we mainly use Datadog for those purposes, and also Grafana, telemetry, and also Elasticstash tools. So my question was, what was your most outstanding or unexpected finding while using these tools?
Some of the things that have been kind of eye opening is setting up tracing, and then we learned that someone had a test machine that was just a computer sitting under a desk that was hitting something and racking up a lot of traffic that ended up being like a pretty penny that was being saved once we shut that machine off because we were paying for a lot of bandwidth. So things like that are really interesting. Finding unknown dependencies by setting up tracing is another really big one. Um, yeah, I kind of know a fair bit about the Datadog, in
Yeah,
case you couldn't tell.
yeah. I think I have experienced a similar thing with the CPU getting overloaded with a process that we are not aware of, or so those things happen.
If you're working with a product that can look at your traces, or not traces, your processes overall, so you can see like the end to end, like where the processes are being spawned from, along with the CPU and memory utilization.
Yeah.
Highly recommend that. I know that's within Datadog. I don't know if that's what you're still using, but
think we can see that from Elastic stash tools with Prometheus and telemetry for logs and on the other things. Yeah,
Definitely looking at the processes is going to be key. And thanks for the question.
yeah, sure. All right.
What's up, Luke? You have your hand raised and you're on camera. That's great.
What's up, Scott? Great presentation. Thank you. I wanted to get your thoughts on sampling versus collecting from everything. I worked for a company at one point that used Datadog and had literally hundreds of edge nodes that came and went. You know, we had auto scaling out hundreds and hundreds of nodes constantly. And we had a lot of debates over whether or not sampling instead of just collecting everything would be valuable. I'm going to hear your thoughts on that.
I'm a big fan of sampling. Uh, Especially when you have more noisy services, because a lot of times that's going to be a lot of repeated noise. Especially like I keep using e-commerce because I just showed e-commerce, but e-commerce, add the cart, add the cart, add the cart, over and over and over again. Someone's buying the same thing over and over. That's going to be a pretty repetitious thing. Why not sample at that point? It will collect the edge cases. So if something's infrequent, that's not going to get dropped.
How does something like Datadog handle that? Because that was a thing that we came up with. Like, well, we don't want to put the Datadog agent on every single one of these machines. Like at the time, and this is 2016-ish, we're talking not pre-containers, but pre-containers. So like, what's Datadog do to sample metrics, especially?
Back then, it was different. It was different. It was we had tracing without limits back then, where you didn't have to worry about it. I don't think you were really paying a lot extra for traces. They've changed that. They've moved away from it. There's now a mechanism to control the tracing and the sampling, either by when you launch it. The easiest way for me to do this is I'm doing things in the back end. Don't worry. So basically, what you would do is go in, and there's a multiple different ways you could do that now. Um, One of the ways you could do that is either through the configuration that you set up, or you can also come through like this ingestion control, the getting started, the controlling that. You can set that up and say, hey, do I want to consume everything? I want to manage my check-in or ingestion rate. I can say change that to 35% of my traces for checkout, and then apply it, because now we have some remote config going on. Or you could even go to like getting started, service setup. Let's just say container, Docker, let's do go. And then we have this little thing here where we can say we want a sampling rate and just do 0.5, where you would do just copy and paste this little configuration file.
That's cool. Thanks.
Much easier to talk for. When I do these, I usually don't talk about Datadog. I try to go all open source. Cool. We got anything else before we wrap it up for the night? What you got, Paul? You got something. I see it. I see it brewing.
Me?
Yeah.
I was, you know, I guess I don't know. I don't want to go on too much, but one of the things about the sampling, we sample 100%, but the costs are so high, we can only keep 3 days of data of logs, and this is Datadog. We use Datadog, so
Okay.
we're like, oh, this has been happening for 2 weeks, and we're like, we can't see that stuff. So it's nice when a customer reports something immediately. We'll definitely have it. But we
Yes.
don't have that, 2 weeks. Usually you go back 2 weeks. You want to see if there's a trend in the errors or something.
I do
We don't
have
have that. So
suggestions
yeah.
of things. Do you uh, with these logs, like, is it something specific that they're looking for that you're looking for in them, like a value or something like that?
It really varies. The logs, there's some legacy apps where the logs aren't that um coherent, and then it spans lots of services, AWS services. So the error could be in a DynamoDB, the
Mhm.
record's wrong in there, or AWS service messed up, or there's some log statement that's not clear. So it's a wide variety of issues. So I don't know if that helps, but yeah.
Luke's correct. With government stuff, there is compliance. However, there's interesting things you can do. Uh, does anyone mind if I do another fast Datadog demo?
It's valuable to me, so I'm
It's
say
valuable to you.
let's do it.
All right. So with that, let's do share. Just going to go back here. So we do logs. We could do, there's a couple things we could do with logs, right? Some of that is going to be log retention, rehydrate from archives. Oh, it has been so long. Oops. How do I get back to where I need to be in logs? Right. They fooled me. Search analytics, transactions, docs, catalog source. This will probably take me where I need to go. Nope. I swear it is easier than this. Cool. Takes me where I need to go anyway. Indexes. You have 3 day of retention, which is like what you have over here, right? So that'll be three
Yep.
day. What you can do if you have like a specific query, maybe that has been like problematic,
Yeah.
or say something along those lines, you can do a new index of a specific query. So something like service equals web store status error uh,
Yep. Yep. Okay.
cloud. So it's underscore provider, AWS, something like that, right? So this is a filter. This is the same one that you would search in logs for.
Yep.
You can
Yep.
copy and paste those around. You can do that and change that to a different thing,
Right.
right? Or another interesting thing that you could do, if it was like a value within the log, you can turn that into a metric, and that metric is retained for 15 months.
Oh, that's interesting.
So let's see. So this one here, Nginx logs request count. If there was something here, I could view that there, and then I could start to map out these metrics, right? Uh,
These will be numeric metrics.
it's been so long since
Hmm.
I'm doing this on the fly, mind you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, this is
this
great.
may not be great.
I think it's great.
Okay, so this one has errors around Python. So Python underscore error logs. We can do underscore error logs. And then I could see like the specific services that are
Yep.
available. They're
Yep.
all right here. And then these are all my error logs coming from different Python services. The more data that's in that as a as the additional cardinality could be pretty interesting. Maybe like customer name. I wouldn't do it for something crazy high. Never do it for anything that's like an instance name or a container name or container
Yep.
ID. That will break the bank. And if you really need additional help, there's this, which is these are all free, by the way. Um,
Okay.
They're free trainings.
Okay. Yeah, nice.
And you can ask people that are on this call. They took the pictures of people away. This was a team I just moved away from 7 months ago. I was on this team 7 months ago where you can take these sessions for free and you get to ask the expert basically.
It's great. Yeah.
And there's that link there. So yeah, definitely show up, ask questions. We also have labs that are available for free. You could do stuff. There's even some AWS labs you can do. And I highly suggest making use of it because, again, it's free. I will promote the heck out of all the free trainings that anyone can take because that's how we all learn and get better. So I imagine afterwards, one of the things that Zoom does is spits out the chat log. So that way we can just copy and paste all the links from here to send to all y'all once this is done.
Great, great.
We did it. We survived my first meetup in a couple years.
Yay. Yeah. I think we're going to turn off the recording. And then if you guys want to stay on for another couple minutes, it's a school night though.
It is a school night.
As Drew always said.
It's summer.
It's summer, but I have to talk to somebody in Israel at 7 a.m. This time zone tomorrow. Thank you for the kind words about the presentation.
Yeah.
I hope you all got something out of it. You can also find me on the LinkedIn. Be my friend. I try to reply as much as possible. Sometimes I get overwhelmed. Stuff. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it a night myself. But thank you all. I couldn't do it without you. Especially the questions makes it more interactive, and I think it makes us all a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I'll leave you with the words of wisdom from my movie quote, which is just always remember to please do be excellent to each other, take care of each other, and let's all do some rad stuff.
All right.